Hello and welcome to ThePrint SoftCover, where we launch the latest nonfiction books and speak to the inspiring authors behind them. In today's episode, we have with us Mr. Pankaj Mishra. Mr. Pankaj Mishra is a veteran business journalist, an author, a podcaster, and the co-founder of Factor Daily, which is a non-profit journalism lab that combines learning with doing. Now, today, we are going to talk about his latest book, which I have with me right here. You can see it. It's called Against the Grain. It's a Penguin Random House India publication that draws from the transformative interviews that have been featured on Pankaj Mishra's Outliers podcast that is available on the SoundCloud app. And the podcast and even the book feature interviews by the likes of Uday Kotak, Nandan Nilekani, A.R. Rahman, Lucky Ali. So this book is unique and it is going to be wonderfully inspiring. And today, Pankaj and I are just going to chat about it. So welcome to ThePrint, Pankaj. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Absolutely thrilled to be here.
Yes. So Pankaj, my first question is going to be about the term outliers, which features so prominently in your book and is also the name of your wonderful podcast. So I just want to know from you what it means to be an outlier in the truest sense of the word, and why the personalities mentioned in your book are called outliers.
So, there is, of course, a literal meaning of outlier. But that's not something how I approached the outlier. So that's not how the original conversation and the podcast started. Actually, it started from the other way. I started meeting people who seemed outliers in things they would pursue, how they would do it, not just the what of it, but also the how of it. And that took me to the term outlier. And that is why I'm saying it's not just in the literal sense. And later on, of course, I'm not very well read. When I looked up the word, it's got something to do with people who take a different path, bold, and all of that. And I think that, but for me, it was an outcome of the people I was meeting, the conversations I was having that led me to the word outlier. And to answer your question about what makes an outlier, I think all of us are outliers. In each one of us, there is an outlier, and it expresses itself once in a while. So I've just curated them in this conversation.
All right. And of course, it's already a very popular podcast. It already has like 1,000 or 1,500 subscribers, more so on SoundCloud. How did you suddenly think one day your podcast is already successful that you want to write a book about it? And what was the process like?
Okay, so first of all, I always believe in the core product, whether it's a story or a conversation. And then everything else is an outcome of that. So as a journalist, when I started, I became a media entrepreneur in 2016. I started Factor Daily. I was already meeting a lot of people. I would meet at least 8 to 10 people in a week and have those conversations. And I think a series of those conversations kept happening, like you and me would do in our work life as a journalist. And then the question was, how do I document these conversations? Because some of them were very interesting, some of them were inspiring, and very honest accounts of people's lives and work. And that's how we reached to this format, which is podcast. And in 2016, I started that podcast. The journey from audio to printed words were very organic again. It was still an outcome of that, journey of conversations. So the point I want to make is it didn't start as a pursuit of, writing a book or doing a podcast. It was just to give a format to conversations. And that's about it. Tomorrow, I don't know what other formats will happen in our lifetimes, but I'm very format agnostic.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to circle back to the podcast. I mean, how did you, of course, you're a journalist, you're always in conversation with people and you're always interacting with big names. But like these are big names Uday Kotak, there's Wing Commander Rakesh Sharma, there's A.R. Rahman. So, how did you get these people? What was the process of getting these people to speak to you? Like, if there's anything you'd like to share with us, because the that podcast is the very basis of this book. So somewhere, I think as much as we talk about the book, we also have to talk about the podcast. So anything, I
Yeah.
mean, how did you get them on board? What was the process like? How did you get started? All of that. If you could give us a history of the podcast as well.
Well, the history was just that. The history was in 2016, I was doing these conversations anyways as a journalist, and a bunch of people, and I would take one conversation to another. Uh,
Hmm.
so I consider my job as a mailman, as a journalist. Our job is to take stories that matter and help them travel.
Yeah.
And I travel a lot. And
Hmm.
this was going on. And let's say, so when I met Anandan Nilikani and told him about
Hmm.
someone else who I had met a week before, there
Hmm.
was curiosity and there was also hunger to learn. And
Hmm.
what was happening is instead of just focusing on the tech industry, which is where my
Hmm.
journalism was,
Hmm.
I was having conversations with other people from different fields, from a teenager who is figuring out how to fight diabetes, to
Hmm.
gender bias in school,
Yeah.
to someone like Rakesh Sharma or Uday Kotak or Kiran Mazumdar Shaw.
Yeah.
I saw a very deep interest in these people to learn from people from other fields.
Hmm.
And and that made me feel more as a curator and as a mailman.
Yeah.
And I think that is what was happening. And when I was in different spaces where I was traveling in my train journeys, during my train journeys, or
Hmm.
meeting my colleagues or friends or family, I kept doing this. I would tell them, hey, you know what? Last week I met this very interesting person, and this is what it is about. Or when Rakesh Sharma I met, and he said the smallness he felt standing out in the space, he's not recovered from it.
Yeah.
I found it very powerful, and I kept sharing that. So it was just that. It was very organic. And as I kept sharing different things with communities, not just
Hmm.
the outliers, but even
Hmm.
others, it
Yeah.
it kept pushing me to keep doing it actually.
Yeah.
And backstories are, I mean, I didn't really put too much of effort in having these conversations or recording
Yeah.
these conversations.
Hmm.
I wanted to catch them where they were.
Where they were,
So
yes.
none of these conversations were in a sanitized studio
Hmm.
environment. When
Yeah.
I met Narayan Murthy, for example, there were birds chirping very loud in the background. Or
Yeah.
when I met Rakesh Sharma, there was a cow making some noise,
Yeah.
and I enjoyed
Yeah.
that, and I wanted to catch them in that zone instead of a sanitized. Because for me, they were conversations. It was not a podcast. It
Hmm.
wasn't a potential book. So when I met A.R. Rahman in Mumbai, it was midnight and it was raining very heavily.
Yeah.
I somehow made to, I think it was Soho, yeah, in Juhu, and there were planes passing by, and they were making their noise. But we actually didn't stop talking,
Yeah.
even when planes were, because it was a conversation. So it's also a very selfish journey, I must say, because
Hmm.
when I was doing these conversations, I wasn't really thinking about how will people listen to it? How do I delight people with the quality of conversations, of sound quality? I continue to be that way. So for me, it was just having a conversation that I was genuinely interested in.
Hmm. And you wanted to share it with the world.
The world was, I mean, at least for me, also, one of the principles I follow is even one is an audience. And
Hmm.
the world sometimes for me is just one person, and
One.
they seem to be interested.
That's very nice. So, coming to how you've written this book, It is very interesting. It's very conversational. And like you say in one place, that it blurs the lines between reading and listening at one point. And you do feel like you are in the middle of a real conversation when you're reading this book. And also, you've divided it into four very interesting chapters. So I want to know why you wrote it the way you wrote it, like a podcast. And why did you structure it the way you did? How did that come about?
I think there was not much of writing involved, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
If you look at it, I have just woven the conversations,
Yeah.
and it has acquired this form of a book. And
Yeah.
it is not my artisanship. It is not anything. I mean, I'm not bringing anything unique to it in that sense.
Yeah.
So that is why it feels like a conversation, because it is originally a conversation, and everything else is an outcome of that conversation. So that is why it feels like that, because it is that. Uh, and this, the other thing is, um, the conversations, had to be structured across different chapters, because this format demanded that, right? I
Yeah.
couldn't make it an endless trail
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
conversations, right?
Yeah.
So perhaps that was the most challenging thing for me
Yeah.
personally, because a lot of conversations I couldn't even include because it was booked.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
like I had over 150 guests on my show, but I don't think I have included all of them at
Yes.
all.
Yeah.
And the chapterization happened because when I look back all the conversations, they were
Hmm.
very natural buckets
Hmm.
that came up,
Yeah.
because failures, for example,
Yeah.
or speaking in
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, all
Yeah.
of them were outcomes of the conversations. It was very
Hmm.
organic, and yeah, it's nothing that I brought in terms of uniqueness to it.
But like when you read the book, I think it's just the amount of inspiration that you get from each and every word, and especially because they're coming from such hugely important people, I think it does resonate with every one. Each chapter will resonate differently with anyone. And I think one chapter that resonated personally with me as someone who really takes failure personally is the chapter on failure. And but I think A.R. Rahman says in one place that as long as you're doing good, you're not failing. And then Wing Commander Rakesh Sharma says that mistakes, not all mistakes can be counted as failures. They are a very important part of your learning journey. And then in one place, you yourself say that failure has been a personal tutor to you. So I
Yeah.
want to know more about that, because I think this is one chapter that I read quite a few times. How was failure a personal tutor to you? Did you face any roadblocks while writing the book that made you feel this way, or anything across your journey as a journalist or in life that made you feel this way? Because I can see that everything comes from a very personal space. So if you could elaborate on that for us, that one line, that failure is a personal tutor for you.
Yeah, it is for us. And if, like Sridhar Vembu said, that if it is a failure, if you don't recover from it. So
Yeah.
if you recover from it, you are there to tell that
Yes.
failure taught me. So again, there is nothing original in terms of my reflection. Failing, I think, is very commonplace. Um, I think there are some cultures that glorify failures. If you go
Hmm.
to Silicon Valley and you look at the startup failure stories,
Yeah.
uh, there are shows from the bars of California to popular museums where entrepreneurs come and proclaim their failures.
Hmm.
Uh, I think in this part of the world, when it comes to entrepreneurship and when it comes to trying things, uh, failure is not part of the mainstream narrative and the culture.
Yeah.
And so for me, failure is personal, like it is personal for any one of us. But I
Anyone.
just expressed it.
Yeah.
I have failed multiple times. With Factor Daily, when we started with $1 million as a venture funded media startup, and we failed to become profitable in 3 years. Um, so failure has always been there. Failure is So it's not a big deal in that sense. I don't think failure is there is a rarity to failure. Right?
Yeah.
It is commonplace. Rarity is to tell it, to share it, and I think the same with vulnerability. So
Yeah.
so that is what it is. I mean, I fail every day.
Yeah.
With if you try a bunch of things, then you
Yeah.
will fail at some of them.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's not a big deal. I fail a lot. If you look at Sonam Wangchuk talked about
Hmm.
failure, and he said, "I wish people more failures so they become better," because he said the stimulation that you get when you fail is
Hmm.
far better and deeper. When
Yeah.
we succeed, we are celebrating success, but when
Yeah.
we fail, so it's not that dark corner, but it's more like you get broken and then you gather your pieces like you pick Lego blocks with a lot of
Yeah.
joy and
Yeah.
hope.
Yes. Okay. So, so your book, just like your podcast, it features very, very important people. And you talk about everything from seeking to failure to learning from your failure and learning from crisis. You talk about very, very important themes. Of course, all of us go through all of these emotions and problems on a daily basis. So I want to know from you, what was the most interesting experience or interview that you had in the process of recording this? Something that I'm sure there is some one person or maybe two people or three people who really like stayed with you, their conversation stayed with you. So if there are any anecdotes that you'd like to share with us that probably haven't even been featured in the book, because I'm sure there is a lot that happened in general while having the conversations.
I Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound confused. I mean, I am sounding confusing, but it's all of them have been conversations, and that is why I will take you back to what we were discussing. That for me, these are conversations,
Yeah.
and these are conversations I would have
Hmm.
anyway. So a lot of I mean, most of the people, in fact, all of the people, most of them featured in the book, I continue to meet and have conversations.
Hmm.
Um, so it's Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pick a conversation or two. I mean, you know it all. It's all out there. Whether it's
Yeah.
A.R. Rahman or Sridhar Vembu or any
Hmm.
one of them.
Yeah.
All of them made me feel something
Yes.
about them or what they said. So
Hmm.
there is, yeah. I mean, difficult to handpick a few or the
But any
most.
experience you had, anything that struck out to you, any experience in the process of recording this podcast, any anecdote that you'd like to tell us about? Maybe,
Sure.
yeah, anything. I'm sure a lot was happening while you were meeting these people, organizing interviews. So I'm sure there are a few things that,
Sure.
yeah, remained with you. Some conversations, some
Yeah.
of the conversations, I'm sure they were all special, but some of the conversations that stayed with you that you might think about every now and then. Yeah.
All conversations stay with me, but I think
Yeah.
okay, I'll try and answer what you're
Yes.
seeking.
Yes.
I'll try. So I think so. One of the things I learned from all these conversations is the courage to care, and I've started articulating it in my own way. Is so. For example, one of the guests I had on the show, I went to meet the person in the living drawing room. And
Hmm.
as we were talking, this person
Hmm.
had a teenage autistic child in the
Yeah.
other room. And this child was getting restless as we were having this conversation. I was recording it. And this person was being very apologetic about it.
Hmm.
It was very noisy.
Hmm.
And the care I saw, I felt in that single parent, for example, right? Towards that child, it made me feel very it humbled me, and the same thing I kept seeing when I went to meet Sonam Wangchuk in his place Sikmol.
Yeah.
So I think the most unique things were not the settings of the conversations alone, but the journey to these places or the journey to these people.
Hmm.
They were in some time those journeys overwhelmed the conversations themselves.
Yeah.
And those memories have stayed with me. Whether I have climbed the Kunnur Hill to meet Rakesh Sharma,
Yeah.
or all of these people,
Yeah.
the journeys had a lot of interesting realizations. Sometimes they were more powerful than the conversations itself.
And in your journey, of course, writing a book and having a podcast and starting journalism labs, that is so unique. None of that is easy. I'm sure you encountered a lot of naysayers on the way. So I want to know from you, because you've written this book and it's supposed to be an inspirational book as well. How did you pick yourself up in those situations? And what did you say to those naysayers?
I mean, so just talking about picking myself up, it again, I think resilience is a very humane thing.
Yeah.
I think thousands of years of mankind.
Hmm.
So I think we individualize these things a lot, but
Hmm.
at the end of it, we just owe it all
Yeah.
to all these thousands of years where this resilience or sense of survival is ingrained in us, whether it's
Yeah.
a physical survival or mental survival. So I have
Yeah.
always felt that. So
Yeah.
again, this is not nothing unique. I mean, it's I don't want to individualize this because I don't
Hmm.
feel I have a claim to that resilience because it's a very shared thing out there,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Uh, so that is how, to answer your question, I have picked myself up. I mean, I have
Yeah.
not picked myself up. It's
Yeah.
our desire to survive,
Yeah.
which is so core to our existence that
Yeah.
makes us do different things,
Yeah.
things that will surprise ourselves at times, right? How did? But then it's very. So I want to just say that it's a very natural thing. Yeah, I don't find anything unique or special or individual about me as a person.
Yeah.
Um, and then on top of it, I meet so many people, and you watch and listen to what they do and how they do. So it
Hmm.
keeps you humbled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's broadly it.
How did they overcome the obstacles in their life? Because everybody has a personal journey as well. So while the sentiment is common across the board, you do have your personal experiences and personal journeys. So are there any instances that you'd like to share with us from your life, from any point in your life?
Yeah, I mean, so it has all happened. Like again, like I say, it's a very ordinary life. I mean, I
Yeah.
have failed in standard third while growing up as a school in the school.
Yeah.
Um, I am a BCom 33% pass out from University of Allahabad. I've
Yeah.
never had an academic pursuit.
Hmm.
And I think so you one keeps failing in that sense, right? I think failure is also the benchmark you set for yourself or the world sets for you.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of struggles. I mean, just speaking English, for example, growing up in Allahabad,
Hmm.
you know, I didn't have much of exposure in that
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
But I think it's just the human bonds and conversations
Yeah.
and experiences that keep teaching you. I think so that is very much there. So whether it's academic failures or
Yeah.
personal failures,
Yeah.
all of them.
Yeah.
And in entrepreneurship with Factor Daily has been a failure. Like you raise over $1 million, close to
Yeah.
$2 million, and
Yeah.
you still can't build a profitable media company. Uh,
Yeah.
I think the thing that has always been a compass for me is all of us have our first principles in that sense, right?
Yeah.
And I I think while the first principles weaken us, they also
Yeah.
strengthen us in their own ways. So, for example, not compromising on ethics or integrity or the conditions of doing business or conditions
Hmm.
of surviving, because one must survive, but we also have to set conditions of survival. I
Yeah.
think over a period of time, they become a compass.
Hmm.
And I think it's our relationship with that compass. And the more honest it is,
Yeah.
you will have failures, but you keep surviving.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that is how I have dealt with failures and challenges.
All right, all right. And I think one more question that I'd like to ask you is that your book seeks to inspire people who are seeking paths to success. Somebody is trying to get a master's degree, somebody is trying to get a new job. Everybody is trying to find success in their own ways. They have different definitions of success. So, any message to these outliers, the ordinary people who will be reading your book?
I would say there is outlier in each one of us, and
Yeah,
I think there is nothing more to it. And I think
yeah,
experimenting and throwing ourselves in situations,
yeah,
that's the only way, because I think the human body and mind
yeah,
is the most astounding thing in action.
yeah,
Uh, if we keep throwing it in different situations and challenges, especially in the age of AI, I
yeah.
see the human bonds
Hmm.
are becoming more important. The human crafted experiences are becoming very, very important. And
Hmm.
I would encourage the core of this pursuit of this conversation or the book or podcast is about human experiences, is about
Hmm.
lived experiences. And I
Yeah,
think that's the core message, because today there is paranoia about AI, for example.
yeah,
And even with AI, if you look at prompt engineering and all of that, curiosity is at the core of it.
yeah.
Algorithms can't recreate human experiences.
Hmm.
Even when we reach a general intelligence kind of a level, which is we are long away from that. But even when we do,
Hmm.
I truly believe in human bonds, and I truly
Hmm.
believe in human network. I mean, my Twitter got suspended in the first week when the book was coming out, and I mean, I don't have a big followership on Twitter. Just
Hmm.
I think it was about 15,000 followers,
Hmm.
and I went there and I saw the message that my account is suspended. So I was
Hmm.
curious, and then
Hmm.
I realized it is my namesake uh, work. And over the years, I have received everything from a death threat to trolling, everything from LinkedIn to Twitter. And I have
Yeah.
lived with it. Very rarely I used to get a fan mail. And I was like, because I have my email ID is also my name at gmail.com.
Yeah.
So that was also something interesting, and it made me believe even more in the power of human networks and the power
Hmm.
of human bonds.
Hmm.
And even with this book, for example, there's not been any promotion as such, or I haven't gone out of the way. I don't have
Yeah.
Twitter. LinkedIn is the place I am around, and I only share my meetings with the outliers. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's one thing I would say is this human bond uh, and
Yeah.
authenticity of that bond. Yeah.
All right. And I'd like to now zoom in a little bit instead of zooming out. I was very inspired by the A.R. Rahman interview and even Wing Commander Rakesh Sharma for that matter, but I think I'm going to stick to A.R. Rahman this time. If you could recount for me what that day was like interviewing A.R. Rahman and anything, any interesting experiences from that particular day that you'd like to. Obviously, you have interviewed so many people, right? There are over 150 people in your podcast, as you said. There are very few people who made it to this book. A.R. Rahman is one of those people who is, anyway, just by existing, he is so inspiring. So, if you could zoom in on that day and a couple of moments that you spent with Rahman that have probably not made it to the book, or even if they've made it to the book, but stayed with you.
So I must talk about a very good old friend who passed away a few years ago, Samir Bangara. Samir Bangara
Hmm.
is the co-founder of Quickie, along with Shekhar
Hmm.
Kapoor and A.R. Rahman.
Hmm.
And I have known Samir for a really, really long time. And I used to go to Mumbai and meet him. We would have normal conversations.
Yeah.
Samir kept telling me that you
Hmm.
must talk to A.R. Rahman. And I was
Yeah.
like, none of these people who appear big, I have never chased anyone for an interview. I have never gone after them to give me
Hmm.
an interview or a conversation.
Yeah.
And it was Samir who kept saying, you must record a conversation with AR. And he was the one who kept at it. And I think twice he reached out, said, "Hey, are you available to get to Chennai and meet AR at his home?" And twice it happened and it got cancelled. And and he still kept at it. And then a few days before this recording happened, he pinged me and said, "Can you meet him at his Chennai home?" I said, "Yeah, why not?" And a day before that, he said, "Sorry, we will meet in Mumbai," because he suddenly has to be there. And he kept at it like a hungry journalist.
Yeah.
He was such a amazing guy, Samir Bangara. May he rest in peace. And the night I was supposed to meet AR in the Soho Club in I think Juhu, I parked myself at a hotel nearby because Samir told me that keep a long window, and we were supposed to meet at 10 o'clock in the night. And then at 11, he suddenly calls me saying, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm waiting to hear." So he said, "AR is waiting for an hour for you. Why don't you come over?" So then I go there. It was raining very heavy. I enter the room. AR asks me, "So, what is this podcast?" For a lot of people that I recorded podcasts with, it was their first podcast ever. They had never recorded a podcast. And ditto with AR Rahman. And almost everyone else that I recorded podcasts with, I had to first tell them what is a podcast. And I told them just the way I told you. I said, just forget this mic. It's a conversation I'm going to have with you. I'm just recording it. So this is a recording tool. AR was, I think he was recovering from chicken pox. And he said, "Can I make one request? Don't take my picture because, my face looks all potholes and all." I said, "I'm here to record your voice. I don't care about how you look." And we sat down and we jumped right into it. And I think having a conversation, a freewheeling conversation, without imposing the idea of a podcast, I think that was a big learning. It's always been for me, because I think we sometimes over-engineer these things. And so that helped me strike a conversation with him. And then we had a very deep conversation. And you would have seen in the conversation, there are lots of things he talked about, from wanting to suicide at one point in time, fighting his mental depression, to his meeting with Michael Jackson. It was very, very fascinating to hear him talk about those things in a very honest way. So these are some of the things I remember from that meeting.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in with us.